Hey, I'm Di McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, family and addiction expert. I'm here with Dr. Brian Jackson, my longtime cohort who specializes in the field of addiction. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
Di and I have worked with addicts, alcoholics, and their families for over 30 years combined. Our podcast and coaching programs focus on families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. Our experience has been that this disease affects families as much, if not more, than the addict or alcoholic.
Is your world spinning out of control? Are you codependent? Are you experiencing worry, loss of sleep, and difficulty concentrating? If so, you're in the right place. Brian and I have both personally lived it, learned it, and now we're going to teach you tools and techniques on how to get your life back that you thought was shattered by addiction.
Okay, let's dive in.
Hey everybody, this is Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. I'm Di McQueen, and I'm joined today by my cohort in crime and partner in business, Dr. Brian Jackson. Hey B, how you doing?
Good, Di. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I think we have kind of an interesting topic today. I wanted to talk a little bit about, or we wanted to talk a little bit about how marijuana has become one of the most used illicit drugs in the U.S. It's actually ranked number 3 behind alcohol and nicotine for, the psychoactive substance to generate. And this kids are sort of taking this on board, right? 61.9 million people over the age of 12 are reported to have used cannabis in, this past year. Those kind of numbers are sort of staggering, aren't they? And I do know that the increase in the amount of THC has been on the rise since you and I were kids, and of course, we did too. But I think the most disturbing part that we wanted to kind of talk about was how this, in adolescence alone, how it might be a safety concern for different times in their lives and in developmental stages. So there's a significant adverse effects on their cognitive and mental health. So I thought, we'd start by Brian maybe introducing someone, on the cognitive development side of that. What are the studies showing besides that it's 8 points decrease in your IQ points? There's some other things that are going on inside the brain. And I thought, we'll let the good doctor tell you a few more things. So
Yeah, well, cannabis now, obviously, you hear a lot about it now because it's on the ballot in a lot of states. Medical marijuana is sometimes very effective, for adults that have chronic pain and things of that nature. But now, legalizing cannabis, there's a lot more access to it, and it's kind of a signal that it's okay to use it. But alcohol is legal as well, and the impacts of alcohol on the brain, have been well documented. But a lot of people don't talk about cannabis, and the cannabis use on an adolescent neurodevelopment is something that really needs to be talked about. So you have the neurotransmitters in the brain, and so when an adolescent starts using cannabis, in those years of their life, it interrupts, a critical period of their brain development. And it's almost gets hardwired to an inappropriate activation of the reward pathway, meaning dopamine. So it's been well documented that the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible for impulse control and other executive functions, is not fully mature until mid 20s. Some people say 22, 24, or 28. So if you think about that, if you are using while your brain is trying to develop the adult rational side of the brain, and you are overactivating the impulse control side of your brain, you're kind of kicking the can down the road in terms of fully developing the adult rational side of the brain. So, we can now peek inside the brain with MRIs and see, like when people are using cannabis, how the brain just lights up red and the adult rational side doesn't weigh in. So, it's a substance that can be abused, and if it's hardwired and gives you a dopamine goodie, the likelihood that a person is going to continue to use it and use more and more of it to get the same desired effect is very, very concerning, especially with adolescents. And Di, you said it's been documented your IQ goes down. Did you say 8 points or something?
on average 8 points. I mean, that's substantial. These numbers are almost staggering. They say since 2016, the increases of use among adolescents is 867%. I mean,
Wow.
that just
Wow.
blows your mind, right? Like the other thing is that it hasn't been that high since, the early 1990s. And of course, in the 70s, things went crazy and then they decreased and then they went on the increase again. And then they've decreased dramatically until 2016 when everybody started thinking it was okay to do this. So, really important,
Yeah.
like you just mentioned, 8 IQ points.
Yeah. And another thing too to remember, so there's different methods of deliveries and different formulations now that are being, put together by whoever is manufacturing this, or growing it, I guess. But people vape it, people smoke flower. Now there's oils that people use, and so a lot of times it can deliver like a much higher and faster peak doses, and that makes it even more addictive. And some of the horror stories we've heard about too is you hear about fentanyl and people buying cocaine, there's fentanyl in it, or heroin and there's fentanyl in it, or things of that nature. We've recently heard horror stories about people who actually smoking cannabis, where it's actually been laced with fentanyl, and there actually have been some deaths. And the whole point, for these people who are selling this, is to try and hook the person to get an even better high, so that they keep coming back and buying cannabis from them. But but we're also faced with now that there's a lot of states where cannabis is legal and you can get it from a dispensary, and those people too. We walk in there and they say, "We're going to introduce you to our bud tender," and they take you around and show you different buds and different, concentrations of THC, and so it's really becoming widespread. And a lot of parents will say, "I'd rather see you smoking cannabis than drinking," not thinking that the cannabis is having this kind of impact on their kid's brain that it is.
Exactly. And I think, the other kind of staggering information that really is interesting to understand, and I don't think most people realize, is that about 30% of all adolescents who use marijuana develop some sort of addiction. So they start with marijuana and then it moves into another type of addiction. So that's one mental health issue. But there is a lot of studies that show the relationship between that and anxiety, depression, and even psychosis, including things like schizophrenia, especially amongst the young men. So I think that's really important to understand that you have an 11 times greater risk of acquiring or developing a psychotic disorder if you are using marijuana as opposed to non-users. I mean, that's a huge amount. It's huge. It's just staggering. It blows my mind. And I go, it's one thing if you're an older, a little bit older and stuff, and you're making choices, but kids just follow kids, right? Like that's what they do. And if it's someone that happens to have that predisposition, or, it just hits them the right way, the right time, the first time, it could be a lifelong journey of, what we consider to be pure hell, right? It's not, it may start off good and then turns, the corner on you. And a lot of these things can be prevented if we just go ahead and move that down the road a little bit, right? So it's disturbing to us, but also we felt like there's a lot of information that doesn't get out to the public, in general. So we thought maybe it would be a good topic to sort of talk about it, um, you know, just being able to. Like, for instance, the way that people are, you've mentioned this, B, which I think is so important, is, you know, just having ways of getting, marijuana. Think about a little kid and there's gummies laying all over the place and they look at it and think it's something, that's a piece of candy. And the next thing your 7-year-old has eaten a gummy because
Yeah, that's
it's
true because it
laying
does
out.
look like candy.
It
And
does.
then they're making them, it's a marketing thing where they're trying to make them more and more appealing for people to buy them. But I mean, the real bullet point here, I think, Di, that we're trying to tell people, is that the adolescent brain development is very vulnerable to damage, from the exposure to cannabis. And, so we have the brain development, and then, as you mentioned, there's also the potential to develop some sort of psychological uh, illness associated with this, be it, depression, anxiety, or something even worse, like you said, with schizophrenia. So, I mean, it's really complicated because, on the state level, um, they're legalizing cannabis. Um, Most states have medical marijuana where they haven't legalized it yet for everybody. And then you have the federal government who says that it's illegal. So it's a very complicated issue. But I think what we're trying to drive home is that cannabis is not harmless. And there's also, people will tell me, there's no withdrawal symptoms associated with stopping cannabis, when in fact there are. Basically, experience that Di and I have witnessed is, like the inability to sleep, vivid dreams, nightmares. So again, if you think about the brain, because that's where everything comes from, you've hardwired your brain for the dopamine goodie. Now you've stopped. So there are withdrawal symptoms associated with stopping using cannabis, but we would rather you not use cannabis and get through that couple of weeks of nightmares and whatnot, associated with the cannabis use.
Yeah, I specifically remember a couple of, experiments that we tried with a couple of people, remember, who came in and talked to us about their stomach problems and how, the cannabis was helping their stomach. And what we both explained to them was that the cannabinoid receptors were being overstimulated so dramatically that if they would just give us 2 weeks without marijuana use, let's see if the stomach would help itself. And they agreed. And I remember one gal in particular that came in with this smile from ear to ear going, "Oh my gosh, oh my God, what did you guys do to me? This is like a miracle." And she goes, "I had no idea. I honestly thought that the cannabis was helping my stomach. And in fact, it was the cause of my stomach problems." You remember that girl?
Yeah, yeah. When the cannabinoid receptors are overloaded, people don't ever really hear about this. It's like the person, stops the ability to eat. They're sick to their stomach. They can't hold down water. I mean, I've heard the only like solution that people get would be to take a hot bath, to get some sort of relief from it. But then they return to the use and they get, sicker and sicker. So yeah, you can, and that's kind of an overdose. I mean, it doesn't kill you, but it's an overload of THC and the cannabinoid receptors that can make you very sick.
Yeah, exactly. So just basically in a wrap, we're just wanting to really inform people that it can harm the development, it can cause mental illness problems, it can cause stomach and physical issues to the body. We just want people to be a bit more informed before they go ahead and make a decision, especially with younger people, to let them understand and where this may lead somebody long term. Information is power, right?
Right.
So there you go, my friend. Thank you so much for your 2 cents worth on this and mine. We hope that this
Okay.
helps you guys a little bit. And we are Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. And always please feel free to call, text, email us with questions, especially at info at familyandaddictionexperts.com. We do free consults. If someone wants to take a few moments and discuss some things with us, we're happy to do that. We just want people to be well, happy, developed in their lives, and assure them that they have a beautiful life ahead of them.
Yeah, and check out our family survival kit on our website. We've got some articles in there that you can download, and they're in PDF files, and there's no charge for those. So, um,
Absolutely. Well, thanks, B, as always.
okay, thank you.
Appreciate you so much. Thanks so much for joining our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more important tools, techniques, and ways for you to focus on you instead of the alcoholic or addict in your world.
Until then, please go to our website, familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. You'll also see links to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please also, if you have any emails that you would like to send us, that's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. With any thoughts, feelings, questions that you may have for us, we would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.